Hi, I'm Barbara Lucas, and welcome to the Green Room, where we explore the environmental topics that green up our world. Here in Michigan, we highly value our Great Lakes and the beaches that surround them. But how many of us think about the islands within them? Today we'll be discussing our Great Lakes islands and the fragility of these coastal environments. Our guest is Dr. Karen Vigmostad, who is Director of the U.S.-Canada Great Lakes Islands Project and Research Scientist at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. Dr. Vigmostad, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So most Michiganders know about Mackinac Island, and they know about a few others, maybe 5, I don't know, but I think there's more, right? How many are there?
Well, I think most people are just shocked how many islands there are. There are over 32,000 islands in the Great Lakes.
32,000.
And they're the largest, by far, collection of islands, freshwater islands on Earth, by far. And they're globally rare and very, very important.
So the word endemic comes up a lot when they talk about species. What does that mean?
An endemic species is one that is found only on a particular area. Great Lakes Islands have quite a few endemic species, which means they're only found on one particular island or maybe particular island, grouping of islands in a particular lake.
And why would that occur?
Well, islands are special, and their species are separated from the mainland because they're out in the water. Okay. So they don't have the normal flow of species other than migratory birds, for example. So they tend to have pockets of populations that breed in a smaller number, and you have some unusual occurrences.
And I know that your work has been focusing on trying to quantify which islands have the highest number of species. Which would you say in the Great Lakes are more biodiverse than others?
Well, our Beaver Island in Lake Michigan is one of the most interesting and important islands. For Lake Michigan, it has the highest biodiversity, and it's also facing the greatest threats. There are 726 islands in Lake Michigan alone.
Wow. Well, the Beaver Archipelago has, you mentioned 10 different islands?
10 islands, and 3 of them, including Beaver, Hog, and Garden, are extremely important and probably the most interesting islands in the lake.
Well, since we're talking about Beaver Island, let's show a video that was produced in 2005 for the Beaver Island Association. It will give us some information on the riches and the challenges to them. Let's show it now.
25 miles from the mainland in northern Lake Michigan lies Beaver Island, surrounded by 6 uninhabited outer islands, remote and relatively undeveloped. The thousands of yearly visitors are heartily welcome to discover and enjoy the gifts of nature found here.
This is not a place where there's something to be entertained. Nature is the entertainment up here.
But island ecosystems are fragile. Working together to protect these treasures benefits everyone.
Natural resources are at the heart of our tourist-based economy. We would be in a real pickle without the pristine natural beauty that exists on much of Beaver Island.
But islanders continue to depend on a healthy environment to sustain their economy because visitors are attracted to the peaceful, natural beauty found here.
Beaver Island is unique in that it has, for its size, all of the major ecosystems that you find anywhere else in the state of Michigan, Lower Peninsula or Upper Peninsula combined. We're talking about ecosystems such as sand dune habitat, marshes, we're talking about bogs, fens, which are really alkaline bogs and are very rare elsewhere.
They're carnivorous. They eat insects.
And we're talking about swamps, northern coniferous forest, mixed hardwood forest, all of it here on Beaver Island.
The island's special ecosystems began forming over 10,000 years ago when the melting glaciers left behind inland lakes and wetlands, rocks and boulders. The rich biodiversity is another treasure to appreciate.
There's been less human disturbance on these islands, and that's certainly a factor in allowing some of these species to be as abundant as they are. For example, we see Lake Huron tansy, this little flower that's a beach flower, a dune flower. You find that quite abundant out here. It's a threatened species in Michigan, along with pitcher's thistle.
Any place there's open sand on Beaver Island, there's a pitcher's thistle. Top of Mount Pisgah, all the way to the top.
Is it endangered?
It's on the threatened list. Both of these have their problem is that they're very limited in their distribution and habitat, but where they grow really well.
Along with the endangered Michigan's monkey flower, we've got two populations of those out here.
The Michigan monkey flower is such a unique and phenomenal symbol of Michigan's natural heritage, all the things that make Michigan such an interesting place to be, that loves growing in nice, clear water. It grows near the shores of the Great Lakes. I think it's fantastic.
Great Lakes islands have species that are important to the whole Earth. So they are among the last refuges globally for a species that could very easily be eliminated, and we'll never get them back.
Yeah, it's opening up.
Let's see.
Even species that are not rare, such as milkweed, are important to preserve as they are vital components of the web of life. Snakes are another example.
There are 7 species of snakes on Beaver Island, and none of those 7 species are venomous. The northern water snake is probably the most feared and should not be killed because it does us a big favor in scavenging and picking up and feeding upon dying fish on our shores.
In turn, the water snake is food for many predators, including some birds of prey.
Very often I'm asked, what is the importance of biodiversity? A colleague of mine, Whit Gibbons, uses the analogy of species as bricks in a wall, and that wall being, let's say, an ecosystem. And we can go along through time and through negligence or whatever, cause the loss of a species. And that would be like pulling a brick out of that wall. And you can do it here, and you can do it there. And you can lose this species, you can lose that species. But ultimately, the wrong brick is going to be removed from the ecosystem, and the entire wall will come crashing down.
There are many ways we can help protect the special natural features of our Great Lakes islands. While enjoying them, keep these 4 key guidelines in mind. Please avoid bird nesting areas.
The problem with disturbing adult birds that are on or near their nest is that it makes them vulnerable to predators.
The piping plover has very specific habitat requirements. It makes a very, very shallow nest in the sand that's often hard to see. To help protect its nesting areas, we put up exclosures that allow the parent birds to come into and out of the nest but keep the predators out. No, peeplo. People also think it sounds like seabird, seabird. And if they're upset, you know too, because they'll trill.
Many different migratory bird species come all the way from the Caribbean and Central and South America for feeding and breeding on these islands.
Some Great Lakes bird species, almost all of their nesting is on islands.
But throughout the Great Lakes, the natural habitats they require are becoming scarce.
So it's very important, the areas where they still come, that we try to protect their nesting habitat, identify where it is, and stay away from it. Especially during the spring, we need to really keep our dogs off the beaches and watch where we walk. And it's not that we can't enjoy our beaches, but the time of year is really important to pay attention to.
Dune ecosystems are particularly sensitive, and wind moves sand around. So it's very important that where we start to see stabilization, dune grasses moving in and their roots help to hold the sand in place, and then things like red osier dogwood, the balm of Gilead. It's important that we don't trample these, make new trails, because as soon as we do that, the stabilization is lost, wind can come in. Turns out also, if there has been stabilization and we destroy the vegetation, certain species that are not desirable, such as poison ivy, love to move in where the area has been disturbed. One of the biggest problems that we have in the Great Lakes today are the problem of invasive species. You've got now very commonly the zebra mussel, which so far has not invaded the inland lakes on the island. We can prevent further spread again by carefully watching the way we transfer our boats from Lake Michigan into the inland lakes on Beaver Island. And it's very important for people to understand that the way in which zebra mussels colonize new habitats is primarily through their larvae. You can't see them with the naked eye. And if those bait wells and the bilge and so on in these boats are not properly cleaned out when one moves from Lake Michigan to the inland lakes, these veligers are very easily transferred to the inland lakes.
New invasives are continually introduced to the Great Lakes, so before moving between lakes, clean boats and equipment with high-pressure spray, or hot water rinse, or dry out for at least 5 days.
Another problem is the emerald ash borer, which has invaded Michigan and attacks ash trees. Ash trees, like so many other trees, produce seeds, and these seeds are utilized by a host of organisms. The emerald ash borer is transferred in firewood, and so the movement of firewood from point A to point B is a problem, and we're trying to prevent that.
Islands are an amazing place because they have these boundaries, and we know the beginning and the end. There are important lessons there for the entire Earth on how to live within limits, how to talk to one another, how to cooperate, and how to still enjoy the peace and solitude that we all also need in our lives. I mean, these islands are sacred places, and I think we have a special moral obligation to protect them.
There's nothing more important than the environment around your home. And it's something that we really cherish. If you really love your home, you want to make an effort towards making it the best as you can, because it's not only for us, but it's for the next generation.
If you'd like to watch this movie in its entirety, go to agreatlakesjewel.org. There you'll find a second movie produced for the Beaver Island Association called A Home on the Shore, about what builders and homeowners can do to protect our coastal environments. These projects are examples of individual efforts, and I know there's lots of individual efforts going on regionally. Yes. And you, I guess, have been sort of instrumental in bringing together these individual efforts.
Yes, I actually got interested, I got interested in islands as a child, going to various islands as my dad had a little boat, and we would go out in Lake St. Clair every weekend and go out to Strawberry Island and
never heard of
other
that
areas.
One.
Very tiny, tiny island. But in 1988, I started getting involved, and then in 1995, I started a project that brought together for the first time ever people who have been researching islands, some of them for 20 years, and most of them had never met. So we had 35 people gather for almost 4 days to share information. And what came out of that was a collection of the first set of articles about the Great Lakes in terms of their science. And this was published in 1999. So this network that we created has been growing over the years. Probably over 100 people are involved now, 100 organizations. And we pursue various funding sources to do particular things. And our latest effort was a major grant to actually put each of the 32,000 islands into a geographic information system. So we can really know that Beaver Island is the 10th most threatened island in the Great Lakes Basin, and the most has the most biodiversity of any island in Lake Michigan, for example. We didn't know. We were making decisions about these islands without knowing the science. So this project has been an effort to gather the science and the policy to help improve the conservation of these very special islands.
It's a great cause. I know that there's been instances such as on Beaver Island. I remember hearing about the Michigan monkey flower. There was like 2 places on the island that had it, and it's highly threatened or endangered, and they had some construction that wiped out one of them, and it was because they didn't know it was there.
Yes.
But they could have moved the building site easily if they'd known. So I guess your GIS work will help people know where these things are so they can work around them?
As long as communities use them to make decisions about where places are located, where roads are put. We see this as the best way to help resolve and prevent conflicts between nature and people.
Mm-hmm. I know there's a kind of a continuum of opinions about what to do about things like this. If you could maybe talk about the 2 ends of the continuum in terms of what some people feel and then the opposition that we're dealing with.
Well, I think people put a false dichotomy, you know, between environment and development, for example. Frankly, without a healthy environment, we don't support human life, and islands are a particularly interesting way to study those conflicts because of the limits that the boundaries pose on human beings and human activities. You can really see on an island that, oh my gosh, recycling is critical, using less, not bringing invasive species onto a natural community on an island, for example, are very, very clear on an island and give us great lessons.
Speaking of invasive species, what are they doing on Beaver? I know they're quite advanced in terms of what they're working on in terms of keeping the invasives out.
Oh, Pam Grassmick and others have been so instrumental in removing Phragmites and leading some really regionally significant efforts to eradicate that species on Beaver Island.
And I've heard that they're pouncing on these little things too. I know Phragmites has gotten a lot of attention because it's all over the island, but I've heard that like they recently had found some Oriental bittersweet, which is that vine that will just cover the forests and pull down the trees, and they found some there and pulled it out right away. They found some Japanese knotweed, which is another really bad invasive that I think people planted those 2 species on purpose. They brought them over thinking they were pretty. And then there's an instance where they found garlic mustard, which was accidental. It must have come over on shoes or bike tires or car tires or something, and they got rid of that right away. So as you're talking about how fragile islands are, they're also kind of easier to deal with in a sense, right?
They are, but they're very, very vulnerable, so they cannot take the intrusion that a mainland area might take. Plus, they tend to hold more of the endangered and threatened species than the mainland area. There was a study done in the 1990s by Judy Soul that showed that islands in Michigan alone, just Michigan islands, or about 600 Michigan islands, had about maybe 100th of the land area of the state of Michigan, but we're holding, 10% of all the endangered and threatened coastal species, which is 7 times more than you would expect to find on the mainland.
And the balance of nature is so fragile. I was thinking about piping plover that they show in the movie, and I guess stray cats have made a big impact on. You wouldn't think that cats would be a problem, but those little nests are so vulnerable. And
cats are a problem actually all over our country. I think they kill 1 billion birds a year, some outstanding amount that I read a few years ago. I was shocked.
And so it's not easy to decide what to do about something like feral cats, because some people feel you shouldn't, bother them.
You can catch them and you can have them neutered. A friend of mine's involved in that activity.
Okay. Yeah, so many things are understated on Beaver Island, such as the pitcher's thistle. It's a thistle,
Yes.
and you think, oh, thistles are not terribly pretty, but you find out that this plant only flowers after 8 years, and it's only found in really special little places. It suddenly makes it all seem all the more worth keeping once you learn about it.
Well, I see that biodiversity, global biodiversity, is like a patchwork of species. And a lot of them are in separate little populations. And we need to try to keep as many of those quilt patches alive and just flourishing. Because high biodiversity on our Earth creates a very resilient planet. And the reduction of diversity impoverishes us all. So it's very important. And one thing you're mentioning, we hope as our project continues to identify what we call island monitors. For example, the Pam grass mix and folks like you that are involved in these islands that can find those, little dwarf lake iris locations and let us know about it and let their local officials know and conservancies know so they can be protected. The people are extremely important in island conservation. The landowners, people who visit islands, have a huge impact on the health of these islands.
Yeah, I would love it if everybody learned the different invasive, like say 5 or 10, really important plants to watch out for, or yeah, that would be great to have everybody be a monitor. Yes. It takes a village.
Yes, yes, yes. And with 32,000 islands,
yeah,
it's a lot of work. But our project did identify the top ones that are important in terms of their natural values and also facing threats and aren't well protected yet. And Beaver's one of those. So we will be concentrating, or I would say maybe the top 20, 30 island areas throughout the basin rather than try to do everything.
Mm-hmm. And then there's some islands that were really wild and then got developed. You showed me a photo earlier of a house right on a tiny little island. It's amazing because those people probably don't live there year round, right? It's just...
No, one of the things actually that's protected our islands and allowed them to have this amazing globally important biological diversity is because we're in a temperate climate. So people aren't flying down in the middle of winter and wanting to have a house there. But if you go through the Great Lakes on a boat, like I have out in, say, the Thousand Island areas where that photo is from, you'll see these almost rock islands almost totally covered, and one of them was totally covered by a house or a cottage with maybe a dock so they can hook up their boats. And you can really see how problematic that is to try to, live on an island that's just a rock.
Are there land use tools that can help prevent things like that from happening?
Oh yes, and the conservancies are really the best places to go for that. The 2 of the 6 partners in this network are the Nature Conservancy of Canada and then also the Great Lakes Nature Conservancy, housed now mostly with Dave Ewart in Lansing in the Michigan Conservancy office there. And they've been partners since day one on this island grant, the big grant we got to put these islands in a GIS system. So they are out there in the weeds, literally the wetlands, and traveling around helping people understand what they have and working with them to help them preserve the islands that they love.
So where can people get more information about what you've been talking about today?
Well, you can look at greatlakesislands.net, and that's the home page for the whole island project. You can look at my website, which is KarenVigmostad.com, and that has links to the island project and the Circling the Lakes project I'm going to be doing the next 5 years, talking to people who live on islands and the coastal areas about the Great Lakes and what they mean to them.
Oh, well, that sounds like a neat project.
Yeah, I hope people that have anything to do with the islands, whether they live on them or go to them or care about them have some kind of story. If they contact me, I'd love to record that for my book and my other work and writings.
So should they go to your, which website should they go to?
KarenVigmostad.com. They
Okay.
can find links to everything else there, including the Island Project.
Okay.
I also tweet
Okay.
at About the Lakes. So that would be about Great Lakes, general Great Lakes information, and then about the islands, which is specifically about the Great Lakes Islands.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Vigmostad. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. It was fun.
It was good. If you'd like to watch this episode's featured movie in its entirety or check out any of our previous Green Room interviews, visit ewashta.org/greenroom. Thanks for joining us here in the Green Room.